Welcome to the Sustainable Travel Podcast. This is a podcast that interviews a range of different travelers from different backgrounds to see what sustainable travel means to them. Today, I am here with Ilsa from Ilsa Endeavours. Ilsa identifies as a fat queer traveller who loves to be hiking in the outdoors, and as a TEFL certified English teacher, they taught English in South Korea for 2 years. Hi, Ilsa.
Hi.
I'm so excited to have you here.
So excited.
I know this one's been a long time coming, I feel.
It really has been.
Yeah. I feel like we're going to be covering a topic today, which is basically everybody belongs in the outdoors. That's kind of like our overarching theme. And I feel like me and you talk about this at least once a week.
Yeah, I feel like we'll either see something or we'll just like have thoughts about it at least once a week where we're just texting the other one. And then we just dive into it and then we go back to like not talking again.
We talk a lot. What are you talking about?
I mean, we do talk a lot, but I feel like we always talk and it's like, oh, this is happening. Here's this, this, and this. And it's always like really intense and like deep. And then,
Yes, and it always gets straight to the voice notes when it's about this particular topic. You're
yeah,
absolutely 100% right.
always.
So, Ilsa, tell us in your own words a bit about you, what it is that you do, and how you like to travel.
Yeah, I'm Ilsa. So I lived in South Korea for 2 years. I was teaching English over there. This year, I relocated back to the US where I'm from. So I spent this year just living in the US again, adjusting from being in Asia to now back in the US. And I've traveled a lot this year. I really focused on travel. When I lived in Korea, I moved over there during the pandemic, couldn't travel like too much outside of the country. So really focused on just traveling in South Korea. And so I this year just wanted to travel throughout the US, travel abroad. So I've been able to do that. And yeah, like Emma said, I identify as a fat queer traveler. So a lot of my mission, a lot of just who I am and what I really believe in is that everyone belongs in the travel community. Everyone belongs in the hiking community. There's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of people and just a lot of media saying who belongs in what spaces. And I think I really try to just make it as inclusive as possible and tell people that whether you don't look like the stereotypical hiker or traveler that we see in the media, you still belong and you still deserve to take up that space.
Yes, 1000%. You really do. I love that. Nice introduction.
Thanks.
I and where have you traveled this year then?
Yeah, this year I went to Egypt, which was incredible. I spent some time in New York City. I spent a month out in Washington State, hiking some of the national parks, doing some things in Seattle, and I did a month-long trip in Europe. So I was in Hungary, Serbia, Romania, and then I went to London for the first time. And then I spent some time in Ireland. So kind of all over. But a good mix of doing some hikes and hiking trips and then visiting cities because I do love that good mix of both of them.
Yeah. And I feel like in your Europe trip, that's a different Europe than most people who go there for the first or second time even would see.
Definitely, yeah. I really wanted to go see the castles, see the cathedrals, and so that's why like Hungary, Serbia, Romania really stood out to me. Seeing Dracula's castle, once in a
Totally.
lifetime experience. I loved it.
Yeah, I need to do that. It looks like so beautiful and it's been one of the things that I've really wanted to like do for ages.
Yeah, I was so happy to do it. It was beautiful weather when I did it too. I was like worried that I'd like put all this time and money into going over there for that and it would be
Yeah.
horrible weather, but it was beautiful, like no clouds in the sky. And it's just a beautiful castle. Learning the history behind it. Obviously, I knew some of it, but just learning more, it was incredible.
Yeah. Oh, that's really nice. I mean, so you talked a bit in your introduction about like there are people saying like this person belongs here, this person belongs there. And I mean, where does this come from? Because I feel like it's, just to kind of set the scene for what we're doing here, a lot of people, in my opinion, would say, well, who's telling you that? Like, no one's telling you that, like it's not something that people are saying. And it's not like no one's explicitly saying, hey, you queer person, get out the outdoors, like you need to go back inside. But where does this idea come from? Like who's saying this and how are they saying it?
Yeah, I think I always say I have never been on a hiking trail and had like someone look at me and say, "Why are you here?" Like,
Yeah.
I've never had that experience. And I'm grateful because I know some people have. But I haven't had that experience where someone's just come up to me in whatever space saying that I don't belong. I think it's social media. I think just the rise of technology and how social media is really integrated in our life. And I think that is where people feel the most power to speak out, which is a good and bad thing, right? Like you have people can have platforms and can share the positive things, but equally people can have platforms and share negative things. And I think there is a big rise right now in people in social media who just have a lot to say. I think we both know that people have a lot to say about a lot of different things. So I would say almost every experience I've had with someone saying that, or just seeing like, oh, you don't belong, like that is through social media. But I think on a larger scale, we also see it in what's available, especially when it comes to like hiking, looking at what workout hiking gear is available. And to be frank, like there is not a lot of fat outdoor gear for people to purchase. And if there is, it's ridiculously expensive.
Mhm.
So you're already creating that divide where if you don't have a larger size, you're right then saying, oh, well, you're not going to be hiking anyway. So like we don't need to make it. And then you're already adding that extra layer then of, well, if you are a fat hiker, you just have to have money because you have to be able to afford it then. And so I think we are also seeing it from the brands and the companies creating the gear and the things you need to hike and travel who are not making it accessible for everyone.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. It's gets very intersectional when you look at it from that perspective of like, well, you not only like can only be in these spaces if you're thin or straight sized, but you also need to have a lot of money if you're not going to occupy what we see to be the standard. And then when it comes to the internet as well, obviously you implied there that like you have received kind of backlash and negative comments, and that's not okay either. Like, yes, we have the idea that like people are just not being included, but sometimes people can be downright mean.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think some people, it's like you have, I feel like people who might come and in your comment sections, I know you've experienced this where like they might come across a little harsh, but they're also genuinely wanting to learn and wanting to know. And then you have the people who just don't want to change their ways and don't want to learn the other side and don't even want to listen. And then it's not even constructive because we can go back and forth all day long about if someone thinks something's inclusive or if people should be able to do it. But I just have such a firm believing in like we're never going to debate like basic human rights. We're not going to debate being like seeing people and giving people that basic human respect and decency. And it shouldn't be this outlandish concept that on social media you should respect everyone. There's things I scroll and I see that I don't necessarily like I might not agree with it, but I just scroll past. And the people who feel like they need to put their 2 cents in every conversation, which most of the time it's coming from a place of privilege where they can't speak on it because it doesn't affect them directly.
Yes, that and insecurity, I think, where like I see people seek you out, specifically you. I mean, I have other friends online, this happens to as well, but I've seen it in your comments where people will directly seek you out because they're having a bad day and they want to take it out on someone who they feel is like either not at their level or like perhaps like someone who they can kick down to. And yeah, like I mean, we're obviously here to change the conversation today and say that's just not okay. Like everybody's allowed to exist in their skin and they're allowed to exist outside. Like that's the
Yeah.
beauty of it.
Yeah, take up that space as everyone. I always say the outdoors, nature does not judge us. The only people judging us are other humans who just are too small-minded to be inclusive and to allow people to do what they want. Because me going out and hiking, me traveling, me taking up this space, it's not hurting anyone. And people who are getting upset about it, that's personal for them. That's on them because it does not affect me. And that's what I tell anyone who ever reaches out to me in my DMs or anything, like live your life, be as long as you're happy and you're not harming anyone, live your life.
Yeah, I mean, yes, like absolutely. Like just be who you are. And it shouldn't this shouldn't be radical. It shouldn't be radical. I
Shouldn't
think
be.
that's I think that's what it is. so when we're getting to radicalism, like we always talk about me, like you and I and other people that I know as well, like everything in this world is political. Like it's not possible to live in this world and not be political, but it is possible for some people to live in this world and ignore politics.
Mhm.
So what's your opinion on that and your experience of that?
Yeah, I mean, like we've said, and we talk about it a lot, everything is political. And whether you like it or not, or whether you pay attention and see it or not, it is because we live in a world where people are politicizing everything. What you're doing is under a microscope, how your body looks, how you're seen in public, politicizing love. Like there's so much where if you don't think that the topics of travel and hiking are not political, that's coming from a place of privilege. Because I think time and time again, especially with the rise of social media right now, we're seeing so many people speaking out saying these two communities specifically, like traveling and hiking, are not as inclusive as people think. And like we were saying, when it comes to just who are we even saying belongs out on the trails? Because you can go to a trail, there's no sign saying, oh, you can't hike this trail if you're fat, if you're queer. But if you go online, you'll see people saying, oh, well, um, like do this, but make sure you're like very active. And I feel like that's always a way when people say that, like, yes, you shouldn't go do a hard hike if you've never hiked before. You need to work your way up. But I do see people using that term of like, oh, it's a very moderate to hard hike to almost in a way be fatphobic to say like, well, you need to be thin, you need to be very active. And they just love to kind of change the words to what they want them to almost believe. And so we see it time and time again. I know we both do.
Watching you. Yes. I think I mean when it comes to saying look travel and the outdoors like they're not inclusive enough that you then have people on the flip side who again we've both seen this who really resent that and they're like well actually it is inclusive it is this and that doesn't in my opinion come from a place of hatred or exclusion it comes from very much a place of privilege like I am not willing to accept that this thing that I love is excluding other people and I feel really sorry for those people in a way because it's like they really can't see it. But I do think that also holds them back. And what we have to appreciate is if they don't understand that it's political, it's because it's never affected them politically.
Definitely, yeah. It hasn't affected them politically or it hasn't affected the people around them. I'm big on like the people in your life directly. I mean, especially like being queer, being fat, having so many friends in those communities with me. Like, I cannot imagine walking through life and having experiences and not thinking, how is this also affecting the people around me? Because the people around me, while like we might be queer, but we might look different and we
Mhm.
might have different skin colors. And I think there's so much where I always am thinking about that intersectionality of things. And
Mhm.
so many people just don't because maybe everyone in their friend group looks the same, which like I understand. I'm from a small town. I understand how you might not always have options in your friend groups, like of how people look at having people from different backgrounds. But I do think there's something to be said if you have walked through life and have not thought about that intersectionality, because it shouldn't have to happen to you, and it shouldn't have to happen to a person you love for you to think about it and for you to care and for you to acknowledge it and to learn and try to do better.
Yeah, there's information everywhere that you can seek out. Like, this is also not to cast any like kind of blame. If you're just getting into this journey and you're like, I'm actually really interested in this, I want to learn more, that's fantastic. This is a really like inclusive space, and this podcast is meant to be a judgment-free zone. So if you're doing that, like, well done, and I highly encourage you to like do that further. But it also should be something that we're all doing. Like, it's natural. Like you should want to learn about things that aren't just you centric.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's just part of living. It's living this life where you should want to constantly question what you're thinking, and you should constantly want to be learning more and expanding. And I think this is a great first step. And I know the people who listen to this podcast, whether this is something you think about a lot or if this is the first time you're really thinking about it, if we've sparked that in like conversation almost in your head, like go talk to people about it, keep that conversation going because that is the best first step that you can make in this process.
Yeah, exactly. And then when we were talking about like politics and the fact that it affects everything, I did just want to say what like bring it back to what you were saying in your first answer of like how sometimes the people who are not being included, as we were saying, are they're simply like excluded because they're not represented, right? So like especially in the travel community and particularly in the travel community that we see online, a lot of travel creators and people who are always in our face showing us content, they fit the mold of a very specific person. And that person is a thin white woman who I recognize I'm in no position to judge on that. But I'm just being clear that like that is the person that we usually see showing us travel, or perhaps a straight sized white man. And when you have that repeated over and over again, it's not saying these people are doing anything wrong, but it just makes other people feel like maybe I don't belong in that space. I don't see myself, so maybe I don't belong.
Yeah, I think the big thing with social media that we all love is that you can find your community and you can find people who are living a life with shared experiences to you. And when the hiking community, these influencers and people that were really putting up and the ones who are getting brand deals, like I think we can say the ones that we're seeing the most on social media are the same ones who are getting the brand deals and who are doing all these incredible things. And this is not to discount what they're doing because like mad respect for that.
Yeah.
But we are seeing the same like copy paste over and over again, where it is the like thin, white, straight male or woman. Because, and then so we're seeing this, and I think just as a whole, we follow social media and we follow people to find our communities. And I think when we have just those two options of what we're being broadcasted on social media, it's hard to think, can I do this? Like you said, can I do this? Can I find my people? Are there people who look like me? That was always
Yeah.
my question I had. Before I did my first international trip, I was like, are there like I don't see people who look like me posting on social media. I don't see people who have had these shared experiences to me. Like, how can I know if I can do it? And it's a huge reason why I started posting to begin with, was because I always said I wanted to just share my life and share my travels. Because even if one other person can see it and relate to me in that sense of, oh, like we don't see us in these huge name influencers that we're seeing hiking and traveling. Like if people can find that with me, even just one person, that's why I started doing what I do. And I love it. I love sharing, but um it's also been a journey.
Yeah. I think that's an amazing mission. It's like an amazing reason to start. And just before I was going to say something else, just before I do want to say that when we're talking about people being seen on social media looking copy paste, I want to recognize, and I'm sure you do as well, also that like the people who there are other kinds of content creators like Ilsa, like there are many different like brands of content creator who don't fit that mold, but at the moment they're not the ones who are consistently doing exceptionally well and constantly being shown to new audiences, and that is the bit that I think needs to change.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. That's the big problem where like I have my little community and I love my little community and my other um like friends who are fat plus size who have their own little travel communities, or my like other like queer friends who have their little travel communities. Like we have all managed to find our space and find people that we connect with and that we have these shared experiences with. But you do have to kind of go dig in to find us. And I think that is inherently that is the problem is it shouldn't be so hard to find people to look like you, because I think we have these big people, these big platforms where they all kind of fall into the same category. So if you're new in traveling or new in hiking and that's all you see, you can see them sharing their recommendations, whether it's for gear, for places to go, places to stay. But if they look different than you or have a different shared experience than you have to take everything they say with a grain of salt. And that's something that I learned is like the things that people share. I mean, especially we've talked about clothing already and this of I see people sharing, oh, this is the best new eco-friendly like brand to buy from. And I'm like, oh yeah, I love a good eco-friendly brand. Let me check it out. And their largest size is a large. And I'm like,
Mm.
let me exit out of that tab right now.
Back away.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, just kidding. Um, and so it's in that, or it's in the places that they recommend where they're like, this is the best place for solo travelers. And I'm like, is it the best place for solo travelers, or is it the best place if you're a solo white man traveling? Like, I think you have to take some of that with a grain of salt of recognizing looking at someone and seeing, okay, well, they look different than me, so they're going to have a different experience than me. Because I think you always see those posts of, oh, the best place to stay. And it's, oh, well, were you with a partner of the opposite sex?
Mhm.
And is that why it was okay? If I went with like my female partner, would that be an issue? So I think there's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah. Well, actually, that does bring us really nicely to like the next topic that we are going to cover. But I wanted to acknowledge that as well as from a blogging perspective, that like when I first started blogging, I would often, so when I started content creating, I really wanted to get into it to like similar to you, but like a different thing. Like I wanted to make a statement. I wanted to hear people who shared or challenged my views, but who weren't just repeating that like copy paste thing that we see. Because I was finding that when I was seeing and sharing travel content, it was kind of an echo chamber of like the best things to see and do in X. And like, and if you deviated to getting a bit political, it was very like, ooh, let's calm down. This is a travel page. We don't need to go there. And but that was my mission. I just wanted to share that. But when we're talking about blogging, we often have like keywords that are really highly searched on Google of like, is this place safe? And when I first started out, I was like, yeah, I'm going to write that because I know that. And then I kind of had my worldview challenged, and I'm not really afraid to admit that. Like when I was writing about places like South Africa, that I have a lot of experience traveling in as both a solo traveler, as a traveler with a male partner with my husband. And I was writing these posts and sort of realizing, hey, actually, like, I don't know if this would be as safe for me being a bisexual woman, if I were traveling with a female partner. And I was having friends of different races, different skin colors saying to me, yeah, this actually isn't that safe for me. And I think you have to think when you're writing those posts, like, who is this safe for? And can I speak for everybody? No, I can only speak for my demographic.
Definitely. I think that's something that so many people don't even think about, and it kind of goes back to it's just starting that conversation and recognizing the privilege of like where you're coming from when you're making these statements and when you're giving your recommendations. I think it's such a small thing that just so many people kind of skip past. And
Mhm.
like you said, we've seen the like, oh, it's a great play, the best place for solo travelers, the best place for this. And I think like I said, I feel like we keep saying just it's I I try to follow people who look like me and have those similar shared experiences to me because I know I can trust the stuff that they're putting on social media with their recommendations. Not saying you
Yeah.
cannot people who look different than you, but again, you're taking all of it with a grain of salt. If I'm following people who are also fat and queer and they're sharing their experiences and they're being real and raw with it and saying well, like this was great, this on the other hand was not so great. Like that's what I want to see,
Mhm.
and that's the good stuff to learn before traveling or before going on hikes. But again, you also have to seek it out and you have to find your little community in the little corner of the internet, which I always call it with my friends, our little tiny corner of the internet where all of us are sharing our little shared experiences.
Completely. Or just even people who, like, yes, I mean, I always say on my post that it's really important, like on my blog post, that it's really important to find people who represent you as a
Mhm.
demographic so that you know that you will be safe. But equally, just even people that might have considered that can sometimes provide a safe space. Like, if
Definitely.
there's someone who you're like, well, they do mention like this a lot, they, or, anyway, to bring that back to like our questions, I like when we're talking about safety and things being more safe for one person than another, what would you say are some examples that we can maybe let people think about of where you as a fat queer traveler may not have felt as safe as say like a straight sized heterosexual traveler might have done?
Yeah, like specific like experiences, places, anything.
Yeah,
Cool.
it doesn't need to be it doesn't need to be like your lived experiences, but like examples of where you could imagine that would happen to you. You don't need to bear all your secrets to us unless you want
All my
to.
secrets for you.
Thank you.
I mean, the easiest one I think to pick is South Korea. I lived there for 2 years, so obviously my experience living there is different than people's experience if you're just traveling. But I always said, and with my friend group I had over there, we talked a lot about like how would we be perceived and how different would our experience be if we were not fat over there.
Mm,
Because South Korea being a Southeast Asian country, it is a very homogenous society. So if you stick out in any way, and that could literally be in any way, it could be with your skin color, it could be with your size, your haircut. Like, I mean, even me just being 6 foot, like I stood out like a sore thumb, and my students would always make comments about my height. Um,
really.
yeah, they always want to know if I like what sports I played. They're like, "Oh,
Oh.
basketball," and I'm like, "Not basketball."
Oh,
But
bless
thank you.
you. Yeah, so like Korea being like that very homogenous society, and I know you've told me as well it was very couple oriented there. Was it like, would you have felt comfortable as a lesbian there or no?
Probably not.
Mhm.
I don't know why I say probably not. I definitely wouldn't.
Yeah,
I feel like I always say like probably not to like downplay it, but
yeah.
I would not have. And I think it is like I knew before I moved to South Korea, I had a buzz cut and I definitely dressed more like masculine. And when I knew that I was going to be moving to South Korea, I started growing out my hair again and I started dressing more feminine. And so kind of the clothes that I took over with me because I knew a conservative country, but still like a couple country, but very like straight couple. So I was kind of in the like just little decisions I made like that. Like I didn't have to start growing my hair out again. Like no one forced me to, but it was just something that I decided to do because I knew I'd live over there for a few years and I just did it because I didn't know how short hair would be accepted. And one of my really good friends that I met over there had short hair the entire time I lived over there. So looking back, I definitely could have had my hair cut shorter, but also it would have affected, I think, changed some of my experience. And like we've said, like Christmas is a big couples holiday over there where people will go out with their like boyfriend, girlfriend, go on cute little dates. But it's unless you're in Seoul, it really does seem like there's not a huge like queer dating scene in South Korea. I had queer friends over there, but most of them just either did not date, or it was kind of like the low key dating
Mm,
scene. Not like my straight friends over there who could go out on dates multiple times a week and go on all these cute dates and things. It just would have looked very different dating. I know something when I moved over there, I knew I really had no interest of exploring the dating scene, so I didn't.
yeah.
Yeah.
But also in a way that's like self-protection, isn't it? Like to keep yourself safe because that was something we didn't cover, but I it's a good to know that like some people in the way that they express themselves in the way that they in the way that their appearance is, that can be either misconstrued or construed like correctly as an expression of queerness or an expression of like hypermasculinity, hyperfemininity, and whether right or wrong, it can then become dangerous for those people to go out in public in certain places. Whether or not that would have been the case for you in Korea, obviously you're not sure, but it can be like in Russia, for example, to be a trans person in Russia, it's practically a death sentence. Like you can't, there are parts of the world where gatekeeping, being excluded, is quite literally happening just by
Yeah.
existing.
Definitely. And yeah, I say like I definitely recognize like the privilege I had in being able to like before I moved to make that decision because I knew it wouldn't affect my mental health like too bad. I knew like making that decision it was something that I was okay with at that time, but I think now it's been I mean, after my 2 years over there and being back here and just really being able to cut my hair short again and dress how I want to dress. I don't know if me now could go back and do that exact same thing and not have it affect me more. I feel like I did a really good job of just not letting it affect me, just the either like just simple things of here with the things like students would say about other like teachers or people they'd see on the street who just look different or how they saw and viewed like gay couples. Like, I don't know if now where I'm at with everything, if I would have been able to be like, yeah, I'm gonna grow my hair out again and like wear dresses, because I just don't think I could do it. And I think me doing it back then was definitely, um, I'm grateful that I was able to because I think it would have definitely changed my experience over there. And also just I think being a fat person over there with like I could not buy many clothes. If I wanted to buy clothes, I would have to go up to the capital, go to Seoul. I had like one or two places in my city that I lived in that I could buy clothes, but for the most part, I was relying on ordering online, getting stuff delivered, which is kind of how it is in the US now, with most stores not having like a wide range of sizes, but it was definitely a lot more difficult over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you wish that straight size, thin, heterosexual people would consider when they're either sharing their content or just kind of sharing their travel experiences with you or with other travelers who may be fat and queer?
Yeah, I think the big thing is know who you're talking to. Know what you're sharing and um I mean the time and time again I get recommended things from people or I see people's posts where they're sharing this like really amazing experience somewhere that has either a weight limit where that was the look I was waiting for like where there's
No.
like a weight limit or a height like limit or just like simple things of when you're sharing like places to eat, places to go. Like I'm always very conscious of the chairs places because
Mhm,
I know like as a fat person like not all chairs are comfortable. And I think, I mean, everyone can acknowledge that.
mhm,
But I think, especially as a fat person traveling, it is a concern you have and it is something you think about when you're picking out a restaurant. And so when I see people sharing these experiences or sharing these places to go, and then I actually dive in and look at it, and I'm like, oh, well, like I couldn't do this if I wanted unless I cut off my leg, and then I could be under the leg, like the height requirement, like the weight requirement. Like I say that all the time, but there's just things where like just branch out a little bit and just think that the people really watching your content and seeing it, yes, a lot of people might look like you and might be the same demographic as you, but not everyone is.
mhm,
And that's something like even just a quick little, like if you share a reel about something that was really fun to do, just put like in the caption, like, but also like, a little blurb, a little more information. So it's not me being like, oh, this is really fun. And then you save it and then you end up doing more research and then you are unable to do it for whatever reason. I always think about in Southeast Asia, you see all of those like swings
oh
where
yeah,
people
yeah, yeah.
like then they're all over there like the where you can like do like the dress and the swings and I always see people like recommending those but I don't know if I can say a single fat person I know who has ever done it or recommended it and it's just one of those things where I'm like is there a weight requirement for that is there like how what does that look like for a fat plus size traveler compared to a straight size traveler
Mhm,
and that's just something that you never see because it's never a conversation.
mhm,
Uh, and
mhm.
so I think all of this to be said,
Yeah.
like,
And actually, I think What I will say, and I'm not defending people who don't include stuff like in their bio because it really annoys me too, and I'll come on to that. But but one thing that I think could help solve that is just simply more representation. Like the
Yeah.
reason you don't see fat travelers talking about that is because they probably don't dare try it because they don't know. Like
Yeah.
no one's gone and done that first. Like no one has boldly gone where no one's gone before, so to speak. So they're like, well, can I? Or like, should I not? Like, and exactly what you said, like you don't know. And all of these travelers who maybe like don't look like you or like don't have that self-awareness to be like, maybe I should mention this, or don't know how to mention it because
Yeah.
in lots of places the word like fat is still quite taboo or people don't want to
Yeah.
use it. Um, that's okay. If we had more representation, then that work could be taken off their shoulders.
Yeah, exactly. 100% having just more representation on all fronts so people of all backgrounds and all these different experiences can share and say, like, this is what it was like for me. So we're not just getting the same reviews of all these places. That is not helpful unless you are that same demographic of that person posting it. I don't think that people realize how many experiences have weight limits. I think that's the question
Yeah.
I get a lot of like, oh well, how often do you actually see this? And I think one of the big ones that I am always recommended and I always see is like people for Central South America going zip lining.
Mm,
Zip lining is one of the like top experiences I feel like people can do down there, and I think 9 out of 10 times there is a weight limit. Um, and like nothing to say, like I totally understand weight limits are in place for a reason.
mhm,
Just like when there's like height requirements for things or even a weight requirement, like I completely get it. Like there's no beef with that. But I do think there are a lot of experiences. Like I always thought about for ride doing like a hot air balloon ride. I was terrified for multiple reasons. I don't like heights, but I
yeah.
was terrified to do this in Egypt because I'm like, are they gonna like? I'm like, they're gonna have to ask my weight, and
Yeah.
like I'm comfortable with that. Like I know it, but I'm like, is there like I never knew if there was a weight limit or not.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, like you put like multiple people in the little thing.
Baskets.
So yeah, your little basket. Like multiple people go in it, so it has to have like a like high weight
Yeah.
limit, I would think. But I just couldn't find anything online, and I was like, well, I'm gonna wake up bright and early for this sunrise hot air balloon ride, and if I do all of this to not be able to go on it, I'll be sad.
Oh
Um,
man. And it's like
but like,
4 a.m.
yeah. And like on the bus there, like we all had to like write down our weight in kilograms, which I'm from the US, so I had to do the math for that. And I was like, luckily, other people were also from the US. So I'm like, oh, great. None of us know what number we're writing down. Um, and like we did it, and like they just used it to figure out like where people should like stand in your little
Right.
basket. But that was just something again, like I had never seen anyone like talk about it. I had no idea if that was a thing. Like,
Mm.
and so it was just like unnecessary like stress that I had just
Mm.
being so in the dark about it and not knowing. And I think that can be said for a lot of things that we see when you're a fat plus size person planning a trip and you want to do things but you can't find the information online, and if no one has talked about it on their social media platform, but not only that, maybe someone posted about it and talked about it, but it's a small creator that you really have to like niche down and try to find them.
Yeah.
It's hard because it's not as easily available as other content that other people may make who look different than you.
Yeah, that's a really fantastic point because, when you're saying about like weight limits, that's actually quite a like necessary and easy bit of information to include. And you don't need to
Yeah.
have that much awareness to be like, oh, hey, they mentioned there was a weight limit, FYI.
Yeah.
And it could be something that I'm sure when you share about it, you'll say, like, there is no weight limit, like, good to
Yeah.
know. And now other people can kind of go with less fear. I mean,
Yeah.
God, personally, if there's a weight limit on stuff, like, I'm a bit hesitant to go because I'm like, so have you not built this right that it can't withstand the weight of a person? Like,
Yeah.
be clear.
Yeah, I remember there was one other plus size person on my in my little group for the hot air balloon ride, and we both the entire time were like, so we're not going to be in the same basket, right? Like you're not going to do that to us.
Nerves.
And it was like a total joke between both of us because we both had that same like we have no idea what to expect with this.
Like nervous energy. But that's a really
Yeah,
good thing. So we're saying like basically just it's not necessarily like what you need to consider. It's just consider, consider that
correct.
other people exist apart from you in the world. And that's what I was going to go on to say as well, is like when I see a lot of people posting, quite often I see them making just little comments that show me they really haven't thought that like other people might take this like a different way, or they'll make a comment that's along the lines of like, um, I'm really trying to think of a good example, and I don't really have one to hand, but like it'll just be like a snide comment where they'll be like, oh, I really don't understand why they did this. And it's like
Mhm.
to anybody else, it's quite clear that they did it for safety or for like common decency or whatever. And
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, that kind of
definitely.
thing. It like I think people need to kind of get past that place of like, I am the person traveling to other people travel to.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think like the like at its basis, like I just always say like everyone deserves to be comfortable. And like that is a thing where sometimes like I know I've done it with like my Cafe Wednesday posts where if I'm sharing if you don't follow me, every Wednesday I post about a little cafe. I was like, I should
Yeah.
probably explain what it is. And like cafe is like cute, cozy vibes, but like I have done before in the past where I've like written down of like the chairs are not comfortable, like as like a 6 foot like fat person, like it was just not a comfortable vibe for me. And that's just like it's such a quick thing where I think about, because it's something that so many people just never have to think about. And I think if you start thinking about the people in your life, like it, I think it just really shows how much you care and love people in your life or just people in general if you start just recognizing these little things you can do to make sure that people are comfortable. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like to just not put people in uncomfortable situations. And it really is just as simple as like if people I've seen other like fat creators do this where if they're calling to make a reservation somewhere, they just ask like, do your chairs have armrests on the sides? And if so, can we have a table with none of those? Because most places will have multiple chairs where
Mm-hmm.
they will be willing to accommodate you to make sure that you have the best experience there. And I think it takes being able to speak up and being able to advocate for yourself, to say like I want to be comfortable and like it's going to be awkward to ask, it may be awkward, but also at the end of the day if you're spending a couple hours somewhere you want to be comfortable. um,
Mm-hmm.
and if you are straight size and you know you have plus size friends, the simplest thing you can do is just to take that burden off of our shoulders
Yeah.
and do it. And just if you're the one making a reservation, you're calling ahead, like just ask. Like it doesn't, it hurts no one. And I think again, it's such a small, minor thing that you can do that to just show people that you really love them and to even just transfer that over to social media. It's again something you could really put in your caption of like, hey, we called ahead for reservations. We asked if they could do XYZ and they could, great. Or if you call and they don't, then you can also put that in there. Like it's good to know and it's good information.
It's a
That
token gesture. Yeah.
it really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That reminds me of the time, I don't know if I'll leave this in the podcast, but it is funny. It reminds me of the time when we went to St. Paul's Cathedral and you very kindly made me test drive 250 stairs for you, just
Yes.
to test if they would be too narrow and too low a
Yes.
ceiling for you. It was a lot of stairs.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like it was one
I
of those
did
things
it.
where I was like, I can do the stairs. It's not the stairs. It was more of a like
Yeah.
I'm 6 foot and I'm big. And like
And
how
I'm 5'2" and quite small.
and I'm like, how tiny is this? Because they kept being like, oh, like narrow doorways. And I'm like, if I'm gonna have to like duck and walk at the same time and climb stairs,
Yeah.
because that would remind me of when I like climbed down in the third pyramid.
Yes. Scary. I didn't like that either.
Brutal because
Yeah.
I'm too tall. And I was just like, my back was at like a 90-degree angle, like walking down.
And just to say, that is St. Paul's Cathedral and the
Yeah,
pyramids of Egypt. And that information does not exist. They are possibly the
no.
famous landmarks in the
Yeah,
world.
yep,
And we were there not able to find that information. So we had to send the short girl up the stairs. And
yeah.
it's fine. I didn't need to go up those stairs, but this is the thing, is like you couldn't do that. You couldn't be like, well, I'm gonna go see how it ends up. Like
Yeah.
that information should be widely available to Cool.
Definitely. Definitely. Because especially if I would have been traveling by myself, I would have just been like, well, I'm not risking it
Yeah.
because I'm not. And
Yeah.
I just wouldn't have done it. And then, like, I mean, I didn't end up doing it anyway because of what you said.
I got you the pictures though, so
I saw the picture.
it was good. It was good. And to bring it back to more positivity, then, where are some of the best places that you visited that you felt like, oh, they're really inclusive, or and also if you're comfortable sharing like some of the worst.
Yeah, I always think like Peru. Peru was very I feel like it just all around was an incredible place to visit. I had like great experiences with like the hostels I stayed in, the stays that I stayed in. Uh and that was one where like I did do a few like guided hikes and it was a pretty 50-50 split where one was really great, the other one it happened. And I
Great.
think that's just what guide you get on the day. Like it's nothing, I can't hold it against anyone. It was just that guide. I still think about him years later though.
Oh no.
But yeah, Peru, I mean, everywhere I've been in Europe, my first time out of the country, I went to Italy and Greece, and then I went to Ireland, and then I did my trip this year where I hit a few more countries. And I think just all those like I mean, London especially, as you know, I loved London. Yes. But I think it was just great. It was comfortable. The public transportation was very like easy. But I think that's the thing, like traveling places, like trying public transportation is always like so nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
Um, and especially as like I will walk when I travel places. Like I'll like walk a lot and then just take public transportation a little bit. But I know not everyone is able to. And so I think
Yeah.
countries that have like really reliable, good public transportation are great ones that like I want to talk about and really showcase for people to visit. Because I think um, not everyone I think is wanting to go on a trip and walk 30,000 steps every single
Yeah.
day.
No, it's true. Something sometimes that I think is a good like gateway into this sort of thing for people is like if you are the kind of person who kind of struggles to see outside of your periphery and understand that like other people might have different like access needs or whatever from yourself, try and think of it from the perspective of a wheelchair user and be like, could a wheelchair user do these same things that I am doing? If not, there's probably a need for some clarification. Like, you probably should be like, encouraging your followers to like know that there's something specific they need to know or whatever, and then it kind of goes up in like layers of nuance from there of like how much information people will need to take part comfortably.
100%. Yeah, I think that I would almost argue. I feel like that's how I kind of started. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
was just kind of just noticing and just being more aware in
Mm-hmm.
the places I travel, where I go, and just being like, oh, like if I was not able-bodied, like would I be able to do these same things? Like visiting, I love to visit a lot of like cathedrals and churches. So many of them have just stairs straight in, and so many of those are just not accessible for people. And it's something I look at when I book hotels and when I look at like hostel situations.
Mm-hmm.
Like being what is more inclusive versus the ones that aren't.
Yeah, and I think that is a good gateway for people because a lot of the time the places themselves will list it and they'll say,
Mhm.
we're accessible or we're not accessible. And then those signs when you're there might just give you that little, oh, actually, yes. Like, and it's a good way to help you sort of remember that like other people exist and their needs might be different from yours.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's a great way to get you to start thinking about other people and other people's needs, even if it doesn't directly affect you. And I think it's as simple as that, as just starting that, having that in your head when you go places. And I think you'll be surprised at how fast it becomes something you do on the regular then.
Yeah.
I still catch myself now sometimes if I'm places being like, oh, like this place like isn't accessible. They don't have a wheelchair ramp and you had to climb 5 stairs versus places where like it might be and I'm like, oh, that's really awesome. Like that it is accessible. Like it is something I still pick up on now,
Yeah.
um, while I'm also kind of vetting places for all these other things.
Yeah. This is a bit strange, but at university, when I was doing my degree, I I had a really good friend who was a wheelchair user, and I like hired a wheelchair for the day just to see, like we were kind of chatting about the differences. And I was like, and this is obviously coming from a place of privilege as well, but I was like, I'm just curious. And oh my God, the world's not accessible. Like,
Yeah,
it's really not. Like, the amount of times, and it was obviously embarrassing because I was using a wheelchair to get like around these places, the amount of times I had to stand up and be like, okay, this didn't work. Like, and then people look at
yeah,
you like, why are you in a wheelchair? And it's like, yeah, well,
yeah,
I can't explain that I'm just, test driving it for the day. Um, but it's so true. Like, there's just not even just pavements. Like,
yeah.
pavements aren't accessible. Sidewalks, obviously.
Definitely, yeah. One of my favorite people that I connected with on TikTok early on of me creating is a wheelchair user, and uh, they use it. They're able to like stand and walk short distances, and they talk all the time about almost the gatekeeping that goes on, just of like if you're in a wheelchair, and then like if you kind of stand up and like use it to like move, because like they talk a lot about just how so many places like say they are accessible, and then they're just not, and then they'll show up there and be like, I thought you said this was wheelchair accessible, but there's like 3 steps and like they can get out and like kind of do those and then just like get it back in their chair. But like, what about the people that can't? And that's something that they talk so much about. And I really appreciate it because I think it really makes me think about it too, because it's a lot of topics and experiences that I will never have.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for like following someone who really shares that and is vulnerable. And I think that just as a whole, like that is such a positive of social media that we're able to, you can follow people, find your community of people who have that same shared experience as you, but also follow people who look different than you. So you can just constantly be learning more about what life and experiences look like for other people.
Yes, and there's a thing that I've heard a few times that is we'll all be disabled at some point in our lives.
Yeah,
It's not, we're not above it. We're not above
definitely.
it. And for you, like we talked about St. Paul's Cathedral, and like I know one of the things that you love is like religion and culture when you're traveling, and you love to really like immerse. I've never seen somebody love churches as much as this person, by the way. But it is like, you love the culture, you love the religion. Like, would you say for you that's what sustainable travel means?
Yeah, definitely. I think having the background I do, my university degree is in anthropology and religious studies. So really just focuses on learning the culture, the traditions, the background of these places that like I studied in university. And I think that just really transferred over in how I travel. Because it blows my mind that people will travel somewhere and just not want to visit a museum or not want to just learn much about where they're at. Because for me, that's what really drives me to travel, to go somewhere completely new, learn about the history, the culture, learn some about their traditions. Like you said, I love visiting churches and cathedrals and religious sites. And so going and visiting churches and just learning about like the history behind them, I will, you know this. I'll read every little plaque in a church. I'll read every little thing that is there just because I want to learn. All of it is because it's what drives me to travel because I just have such a passion and interest of learning about these places and especially when it comes to the culture, the religion aspect. And so for me, definitely, so when I think sustainable travel, I know a lot of people probably think just like the environment and nature, but like we've said and what we've dove into on this is just it's so much more than that. It's being inclusive, it's having that worldview, it's wanting to expand your knowledge and know that cultural, religious, historical background of these places that you can travel.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I ask that question on every one of my podcasts. And I think if anybody ever asked me, it would be an hour's podcast, like in itself, just me answering
Yeah,
the question because for me, like it's everything. It's just, what is travel if not sustainable in a way? Like we just need to fix. so many things, but then at the same time, like so much of it is wonderful and like could be sustainable and regenerative in its own way. And when it comes to the inclusivity element, like I just don't think that's talked about enough. Like I don't think we have enough people in the world saying, like everybody should be allowed in travel spaces. And of course, you get like countries where people physically are not allowed. But beyond that, and as much as we can, like the world should be open to everybody.
Definitely, yeah. It should be open to everyone. I think it should be a larger conversation than it is because I think a lot of people just don't realize how so many places are not inclusive. And I know that me and you talk a lot about like your experience in Africa with your husband, so a male partner, versus if I would go to a handful of these countries, would I be able to go with a partner of the same sex, where I'd be able to go with a partner that's not a man?
Mm,
And even more than that, of just how I look and how I present. I'm very visibly queer. So what does that look like for me compared to someone who can maybe pass more, someone who is straight? And so I think there's so much more. And it's such a larger conversation that people just don't talk about, that I think this podcast is a great starting that conversation, hopefully getting people to at least start thinking about it. Because I know me and you talk about it a lot. It's my lived experience of when I try to go to places. When I went to Egypt, it's a big reason why when I went to Egypt, I did a group trip. And because I knew I would not want to go as a solo queer traveler. And it was just a decision I made. And I know people have traveled there solo and probably have had great experiences. But for me, when it just came down to the safety, it was worth spending that extra money to be in a group
yeah.
trip so I would not have to stress or have that extra worry just because of how I look and how I present and all of that. And
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
It's like I said earlier on the podcast, like I'm bisexual and like it's something for me that like could have been a concern in my life. I'm like fortunate that the partner that I settled for, like he is a man and like settled for that I'm with and love and married. He is a man and like that does make traveling for me significantly easier than if I had a partner who wasn't a man. So yeah, like I'm not unaware of it and I think more people this conversation should go further. You're completely right. So, to wrap up, what are you working on at the moment and where can people find you?
Yeah, like I said, I was in South Korea for 2 years and I will be sharing South Korea content the rest of my life. But I'm living in the US now. So, like I said at the beginning of this, I've done a lot of travel this year, and I have not shared a single thing on social media about it. So, I will be getting ready, diving into sharing my experience as a fat queer person in Egypt, New York City, all the places I went in Europe. I'm going to be doing all of that online. I am sticking in the US for a little bit. I'll be teaching here, which is really exciting. So just a lot of exciting new things coming for me, but definitely we'll still be connecting with my online community and sharing all my experiences. So yeah, definitely where you can find me. I'm on Instagram and TikTok, Ilsa's Endeavors. So my cafe Wednesday
Yeah.
content. There's my cat.
Wait, isn't it Ilsa Endeavors? It's not Ilsa's Endeavors.
Ilsa's Endeavors. There's an S.
Is that?
Yeah.
Oh my God. This is blowing my mind.
I love this.
Compute.
Yes. Yes.
Well, now with that nugget to end on, this has been the Sustainable Travel Podcast. You can find us on Instagram at the Sustainable Travel Podcast, or we also have a Facebook group which is called Sustainable Travel Tips Group. If you enjoyed this episode or found it useful, please rate us on Spotify, and you can also like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is that_travel. Thank you so much.